Hello and welcome to this 2021 In Memoriam episode of Advanced TV History. It's been a while, folks. I know I've been away from the microphone, but that's not because I've been shirking duties or sick or caring for anyone who is dealing with COVID-19. Nope, I was elected to my condo board and then became president not long thereafter. So it was a very busy 2021 for me away from the microphone and writing. But that doesn't mean that I haven't been thinking about you. In fact, what other work I've been doing is developing a book that takes some of these very topics and subjects and even some of the episodes that I have produced in the past, going back to 2015, and turning it into a book that has a much more graphic component. Because what I find most important is that these stories, the memories of women who were behind the scenes, they were in front of the camera, they were important in so many different ways, those are being lost. There's just so much content out there and so many opinions, and still very much a force driven by men to tell the stories of men because nobody really is interested in the stories of women, and I take great umbrage with that. As I look back at 2021, I do so mostly looking for those very tall trees of women who were in a field. Many of them were trailblazers. They left their mark in their own ways. They rose from just regular working families, and they boosted their own egos, and they went out and they tried. And that says a lot these days. That is a lesson in and of itself. So when I think about 2021 and the many podcast episodes I've done in the past that in fact include some of these women, I can't help but first highlight the tremendous loss in 2021 by the Mary Tyler Moore Show. In addition to Betty White and her very, very last-minute departure at the age of 99, we also lost Cloris Leachman, who played Phyllis, and we lost Gavin MacLeod, who played Murray, and Ed Asner, who played Lou Grant. That leaves, as the only somewhat regular member of the news crew, Gordy the Weatherman, who is played by John Amos. That will be a big passing of a beloved American show that broke the ground for women in so many ways. But in the meantime, we wish John Amos a very healthy and happy 2022. All right, here we go, folks. Let's start off with Tanya Roberts, who you may perhaps remember from that 70s show, or maybe from the last season of Charlie's Angels when she stepped in to fill in for Shelley Hack. Tanya Roberts was a model. She did vocal talent, but at the age of 65, we lost her last January. Also in January, Cloris Leachman, who, as I said, yes, played Phyllis on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and also in her own titled show, Phyllis. And I could sing the theme song from Phyllis right now, but you don't want that to happen. She was also perhaps very memorable in Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein as Frau Blücher. And she stepped in the later seasons of Facts of Life when Charlotte Rae left. This was a woman who was trained through the Actors Studio. She was very much a part of the late 40s on Broadway. She was in film and TV as early as the early 50s. Cloris Leachman also appears in a few memoirs and biographies, and that's what fills my shelves. Lorna Luft, who is Judy Garland's middle child, called Cloris Leachman a very dear neighbor in her memoir, in a period of time when Judy and her younger children, Lorna and Joey Luft, were living in a very celebrity-filled neighborhood in Beverly Hills. Lastly, Cloris Leachman went to Northwestern University here in Illinois and was born in Des Moines. So yeah, you know what? The Midwest is actually represented in some of these very, very prolific and wonderful women. She passed at the age of 94. Godspeed, Cloris. Yes, that takes us to Betty White. And even though Betty White lived for almost another year later, we cannot discount her record and role in TV. Cloris and Betty White have stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Additionally, Cloris Leachman is in the TV Hall of Fame. But Betty went on in her prolific career from the Mary Tyler Moore Show and even her own shows. My gosh, I did an entire episode on Betty White back when she was a spry 94-year-old. Go back and listen to that. That's a very early episode of Advanced TV History. There were many Betty White shows, actually, which is kind of fun. And it's a reminder that she continued to hone her craft and stay connected to the industry until she found the right roles and the right opportunities. Mary Tyler Moore being one of them, Golden Girls, and lastly, Hot in Cleveland, which I loved. Oh my gosh, there was a woman who really had perfected her comedic timing, her physical gestures. Oh, goodness. She ended up, well, on her shelf today as people are cleaning out her house, 5 Emmys, 2 daytime Emmys. And she was named an honorary forest ranger by the U.S. Forest Service. She was also an animal activist. And I think every January 17th, when her birthday rolls around, I may have to send a donation to a rescue organization. And lastly, she was, at least according to current records, she was the oldest host of Saturday Night Live at the age of 88, and that was back in 2010. Godspeed, Betty White, who was born in Oak Park, Illinois. It's kind of amazing to think that 99, and there are still people out there who wish you had lived longer. That's the greatest testimony to a life well lived. Another life well lived that we absolutely need to celebrate as much as Betty White is Cicely Tyson, who did not necessarily deliver the laughs and the winks and the ribald comments about life and love, but Cicely Tyson made her own profound impact on TV, and she passed at the age of 96. And for more on Cicely Tyson, which I hope to bring to you, go ahead and jump the line and find her biography, or her memoir, which was only written in 2021, written and published, called Just As I Am. I am looking forward to reading that book because I will be the first to say I don't know enough about Cicely Tyson and the life she lived in the entertainment field as a bit of a pioneer and a very visible pioneer. First known, perhaps, for her work in the film Sounder in 1972, which earned her an Oscar nomination and a Golden Globe. And from film, then, she transitioned over to TV with her work in the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, in Roots, in a lot of storytelling around slave life. And at that point in American history, not long after the Civil Rights Movement had landed and the Civil Rights Act, Cicely Tyson came to personify that in so many roles. Go to her IMDb or Wikipedia pages to see just how prolific she was. She ended up earning a Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2016, earned a Tony. She had been recognized with a Kennedy Center Honors in Washington, D.C., and she's in the TV Hall of Fame. Cicely Tyson. Wow. And lastly, if that wasn't all enough, she was Lenny Kravitz's godmother. Cicely Tyson, you were phenomenal. Thank you. Getting back a little bit to light comedy, interesting comedy, is a woman named Jessica Walter, who passed at the age of 80. Her career, for the most part, she dabbled in daytime, and the TV series that is most credited to her, which was called Amy Prentice, literally only lasted 3 episodes in 1974 and 75. But that was at a period of time where the only other shows, dramas that were about women and led by women, were like Policewoman. That was it. We hadn't quite had Charlie's Angels spring onto the TV set and change how we saw women. So Amy Prentice lasted for 3 episodes. And then, of course, as an older woman, probably in her late 30s, it was only to our surprise that in the mid-2000s, she is cast as Lucille Bluth in Arrested Development. And wow, what confidence she brought, what a lovely, sarcastic command of the work and the comedy that was embedded in Arrested Development. And then, she was appreciated. She had her second wind in the industry. And then in 2018, it gets discussed, it gets brought out, and it feels confident saying this, that Jeffrey Tambor from Arrested Development had in fact been very verbally abusive. This actually made it into the New York Times. And she called him out on it, and she said it was unacceptable. It was perhaps the worst experience she had ever had, worst professional experience, the worst behavior she had ever witnessed. And he apologized. And this is all sort of playing out just a couple of years ago. You might remember it. And yet the younger castmates on Arrested Development their immediate knee-jerk response through their publicists was, well, this is okay. It happens a lot. He was under pressure or whatever. And it raised a bit of a ruckus on social media, and people weren't having it. It was 2018. There was a lot of calling out of bad behavior just 3 or 4 years ago. And ultimately, they apologized. You got to give Jessica Walter credit that 4 years ago, at the age of, in her mid-70s, remembered it, was finally ready to confidently confront it, to call out a man who too had a celebrated career by virtue of his role behind the scenes on Arrested Development, and he was carrying a lot of power. It had gone to his head for a period of time and resulted in some really poor behavior. Good for you, Jessica Walter. Thank you. Thank you for giving other women the confidence that while no, you might not be able to speak up at that moment, there will come a point in time where your voice gets stronger, your conviction just finally hits the wall, and you say, I have to stand up. Thank you, Jessica, because I won't ever forget this. That takes me on to, well, the list is going to get a little harder for me to describe to you. You may not necessarily recognize their name or even the shows that they were in, but that does not discount the fact that they tried, they put themselves out there, and in some cases had some good wins and successes and are part of the fabric of American culture, TV, and made a difference in the lives of young women who were watching TV. Let's talk about Markie Post, for instance, who passed at the age of 70. And you might remember her from Night Court, 1984 to 92, which was a pretty good series. Hearts Afire, 1992 to 95, starring John Ritter. And actually, she got her start behind the scenes on game shows. She was a production assistant navigating the world of game shows back in the 70s, and that led her to acting. And her list of accomplishments are largely TV and made-for-TV movies, TV episodes. Markie Post passed. A much more significant cultural icon at the age of 76, Mary Wilson, who was a founding member of the Supremes and the group that preceded the Supremes. By virtue of her being a member of the Supremes, she is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as well as the Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame. As a member of the Supremes, she was on shows such as Hullabaloo, Hollywood Palace, The Dean Martin Show, The Ed Sullivan Show. And in her solo career, she had some DVDs. She did charity work. She was identified and nominated and worked with the U.S. State Department as a cultural ambassador. She also wrote 4 books documenting various aspects of the Supremes. Diana Ross has not been very prolific or vocal about the background of the Supremes, the experience that was there, but evidently Mary Wilson took many, many notes. Mary Wilson, as one of the members of the Supremes, by staying visible long after the Supremes had broken up, which is now 50 years ago, she continued to create one more person out there who could be recognized with representation, that young women of color could see that there was one other path to take. There was the Diana Ross path, and there was the Mary Wilson path. And that great talent and hard work can get you all sorts of different places. So while the loss of the singular band, the singular girls group known as the Supremes, broke up, it did create opportunities, not just for Diana, but for Mary Wilson as well. So at the age of 76, again, about Diana Ross's age, she was able to turn that longevity into a lot of impact in the lives of many young women who want to sing. Let's move on to Amy Johnston, who was more prolific in the 70s and the 80s. She held the honor of being one of the few women infrequent cast members on Welcome Back, Kotter, which was just back in the 70s in an age when, wow, every sitcom was basically filled with a bunch of men. But she was on Welcome Back, Kotter. She did small roles in Cagney and Lacey, Charlie's Angels. She went on to basically return home to the area where she grew up, West Fork, Arkansas, and continued to teach drama. And she just passed in 2021 at the age of 66. I will give a shout out as well to perhaps names that we don't entirely recognize from American TV, but now that we have exhausted all of American TV and lots of us are streaming British and international TV shows, you may recognize the name of Una Stubbs, who was a huge player in the British TV world, as well as a dance and theater celebrity back in the 50s. In the 60s, she held a significant role in the BBS sitcom Till Death Do Us Part, done a bunch of TV and theater well into her senior years, and Una Stubbs passed at the age of 84. We can move on then to Lisa Baines, who is actually Ohio-born, but Juilliard educated, who launched right from Juilliard onto Broadway back in 88, and she was on Broadway again in 98 and 2009, every 10 years or so. And in between all those Broadway stints, Lisa Baines went into TV, and she was in The Trials of Rosie O'Neill, which starred Sharon Glass, King of Queens, Nashville, China Beach, Murder, She Wrote, Good Wife, all the good staples, right? So Lisa Baines, if you Google her, you'll certainly recognize the face. She passed at the age of 65, all too soon, not in any way that she could have predicted, but one that will teach us a lesson above and beyond. Oh, it's good to work hard and be a good supporting castmate to others and things. And that is, in Manhattan's Upper West Side, she was struck by a motorized scooter and died of significant injuries. In fact, the 26-year-old man who was driving the motorized scooter fled the scene, and they only found him hours later. Lisa Baines passed all too soon. She was vibrant, touched many, many different TV series, and lo and behold, that's how her number gets called. The next batch of names are even less known, but I feel compelled to do the roll call anyway. At the age of 98, a woman named Gloria Henry passed, and Gloria's time on TV was in the earliest years of TV. Though she started out in the 40s in film, she went on in the 50s to be part of the Dennis the Menace series as Dennis's mother. And Dennis the Menace ran from 1959 to 1963. So you could call her, for the older baby boomers, sort of their Carol Brady of sorts. Arlene Galanka, who, if you were ever watching The Andy Griffith Show or the follow-up Mayberry RFD, Arlene played Millie, the girlfriend, performed in a lot of single episodes of TV series over the years, vocal talent. She had 30 film roles. And she was born in Chicago, too, hey? But she passed at the age of 85. Godspeed, Arlene Galanka. Now, the next one, if you're of a certain age, you will smile, and you will smile fondly. There's a woman who is named Billie Hayes, who was known as Witchy Poo. Witchy Poo was a very central figure in a TV show that actually was a British import called HR Pufnstuf, which only lasted for 17 episodes and yet is iconic. You probably can find pieces of it on YouTube, if not entire episodes. Billie Hayes had a Broadway and film career, but ultimately it was this work on TV which made her a little bit more of a household name. She had also performed lots of vocal work and actually, like Betty White, had a strong affinity for animal rescue and had created her own rescue nonprofit called Pet Hope. And Billie Hayes, Witchy Poo, actually, too, came from the Midwest. She was born in Duquesne, Illinois, passing at the age of 96. Bridget Hanley. So if you are older than I am, Bridget Hanley immediately in your mind is the redhead lady who was in Here Come the Brides, which was a TV series 1968 to 1970. I don't believe it really ran much in syndication. And then she went on as just a feisty, good actress to be in a TV series called Harper Valley PTA, which, if you are familiar with the song Harper Valley PTA, you understand it's about small town life and hypocrites, just a bunch of hypocrites. She went on to be in episodes of Mama's Family. I believe she had a recurring role in Murder, She Wrote. Bridget Hanley passed at the age of 80. Cynthia Harris's face is perhaps more recognizable to you than her name, and she too studied at the Actors Studio. So many of these women, although their careers themselves never quite formed, their training was the highest standard that is comparable to many of the biggest stars that ever appeared in film. Cynthia Harris, her lesser-known roles were perhaps in Archie Bunker's Place. Then she was in All My Children, off and on, and perhaps most well-known for her role as Sylvia in the series Mad About You. Cynthia Harris passed at the age of 87. Nikki Graham was a British TV personality, a model, an author, and we may not know about her, but again, we have a lesson that comes out of Nikki Graham's life. She was a part of reality shows and along the way became very confident in her own voice, discussing her eating disorder, the eating disorder that ultimately took her. She died of complications of anorexia nervosa. And she was the author, 2 books, 2009, Dying to Be Thin, and 2012, Fragile. This coming from a woman who passed in 2021 at the age of 38. So when she was writing about her eating disorder, she was young. And we did a podcast episode about eating disorder films that were a huge part of Lifetime TV when cable TV first started launching, and perhaps taught America to better understand and approach eating disorders. And of course, then I won't talk about the fact that Karen Carpenter has been dead too long, but I tell you, every time I hear her voice, every time. Godspeed, Nikki Graham. You entered a life and you lived it well. There's a woman named Martha Delaurentis who passed at the age of 67 of cancer. Martha Delaurentis was married to Dino Delaurentis, and together they produced films and the TV series Hannibal. She actually had a background in production accounting before she met Dino Delaurentis. A woman named Sabine Schmitz is a German race car driver, passed at the age of 51 of cancer. So she was a Gen Xer and was racing cars in Germany, and then that career sort of began to fizzle. She won a couple good races and then was drafted over to the BBC's TV series Top Gear, and so had a little stint as a commentator. But if you are a Motorhead young woman, you saw in Sabine Schmitz the opportunity to fulfill your interests or your career, your passions. While we won't ever probably have seen Sabine Schmitz, she was a model to somebody, and that's kind of cool. Suzanne Douglas was born in Chicago, passed away just in 2021 at the age of 64 of cancer. And Suzanne Douglas, her major role was in the WB's The Parenthood, which ran from 1995 to 1999. She was also in a bunch of films and made-for-TV movies, and her work in The Parenthood earned her an NAACP Image Award in a TV series. And those are important. That is where representation is celebrated first and foremost. And the rest of us just need to be mindful. If you were to Google or search the NAACP Image Award, it's a tremendous honor roll of where the work really has been done year in and year out, whether it was celebrated by the Emmys or the Golden Globes or the SAG Awards. You know that the NAACP is paying attention year in and year out. That brings me to Catherine Krieg, who is probably, again, unless you are in the New York area, you might not even recognize that name. Catherine Krieg passed at the age of 47 from a sudden cardiac event. Her prominence was in the New York area TV news channels. Graduated from NYU with a degree in broadcast journalism. She started in TV news at NY1 and then went on to a number of significant regional roles as a TV news person. And then in 2011, went back to New York to WNBC. Catherine Krieg won an Emmy. She won the Edward R. Murrow Award and an AP Associated Press Award. Catherine Krieg left us all too soon at the age of 47. And that brings me to the last one. Again, another personality where a life lived got her onto a reality show and exposed her to the people who could appreciate her the most. Carrie Vincent was an Australian-American, ultimately was found by the Food Network and brought forth her own personality and her experience as a baker and a cookbook author to be part of the TV series in 2014, Save My Bakery. And when you think about all of those reality shows and all of those people who never thought that what they had to offer would be recognized, as much as you might love or hate reality shows, they are there and they are a foot in the door so that we could have experienced somebody like Carrie Vincent and she could have felt valued. She passed away in 2021 at the age of 75. So really, if she was doing Save My Bakery just 8 years ago, she was in her late 60s at that point. And isn't that the message that we should all take from this incredibly robust, active, vibrant group of women, that it is never too late to begin realizing your dream and taking your passion and moving it into your voice and then letting it fly, just as I'm doing to you right now, here from my closet. My sources for all these little bio riffs was ET Online, Wikipedia, and a little bit of People magazine because, of course, People made the mistake of putting Betty White on before her birthday. And that's the other thing is never, count your chickens before they're hatched. Don't run the victory lap until you've actually won the game. Let's keep our eye here in 2022 on some of the older crowd and the fact that they are still vibrant. And I won't mention Dionne Warwick and Jane Fonda, though, because they're still in their 80s. But now in their 90s, who still occasionally appear on TV, on Twitter, making a difference. Rita Moreno, absolutely. West Side Story just this past year. Marla Gibbs. Yes. And Marla Gibbs I think has a close relationship with Regina King. So we will continue to see Marla Gibbs, who I believe just received her star on the TV Walk of Fame in L.A. Barbara Barry, a name and a face that should be familiar to you, as well as Estelle Harris. Angela Lansbury, at least she still tweets. I don't know that she's doing much, although occasionally these people pop up in awards shows. Angela Lansbury is into her mid-90s as well. Barbara Walters, what's to say about that incredible career and the legacy she has left for so many women, not just in TV news, but entertainment as well. Eva Marie Saint, Tippi Hedren, and some of these women do, in fact, have connections to TV, so I'm not just going off of film. We also can look to the men who at this point in their 90s are still active and contributing. Along the way, through the years, they have definitely contributed and been allies to TV careers of women, including Norman Lear, Tony Bennett, and Bob Newhart. May they have, all of them, have a very healthy and happy 2022, and that they are able to bring their voices and their sarcastic selves and their wisdom to the entertainment field as a whole. I will close this out by saying thank you to Catherine Yang, who edits and brings this audio quality to its highest possible level. I encourage you to go to tvherstory.com, the website where you can find and access all the archives, the many episodes I've talked about, whether it's about eating disorders or Betty White or the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Also, when you're at the website, you can sign up for our e-newsletter, and I talk mostly about what I've been watching, what I've been reading, a few other random thoughts, and keeping you up to date on the book that I'm writing, which, again, is taking some of these stories and bringing them to life in a whole different format. You can also find Advanced TV Herstory on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Stay in touch with me also by just sending me an email at advancedtvherstory@gmail.com. That's it. I hope you recognize that 2021, those ladies who left us, were profound in their own ways. They represent hard work, diligence, being good, being nice. And in the case of Betty White, I think what we can learn from her is that you need to continue staying in the game and perhaps not necessarily reinventing yourself, but evolving and continuing to work on your craft of whatever it is that you bring to the world. Continue working on that, and people will continue seeing the value, and new people will get to know you and recognize it and make it shine even brighter. So that's it. This is why I podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.